Hey everybody. What I'm about to share with you is a free full-length preview from our brand new online course, Synthesis and Sound Design, by Myagi, one of the world's top sound designers. What he's going to show you is how to process a synth lead that he's made in Native Instruments Massive using a whole chain of audio effects in an audio effect rack in Ableton Live. If you like what you see in this video, you can check out more information on the course by clicking the link below in the description field of the video. We've got more free previews available on our website for you there. For those of you who aren't familiar with Myagi, he's designed sound banks for some of the world's most infamous and popular synthesizers. So I'm stoked for you to check out this video. Hope you enjoy it.
So I'm just going to pop back into Ableton from Massive here, and I'm going to turn this into an instrument rack, and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm just going to relabel my instances of Massive here. So I'm going to have top, mid, and I'm going to have fattened. And I'm choosing those names because we're not really going to have a top and mid separately. This is a very big synth sound, and it's going to take up all of the spectrum that I really need. But I do want to have this secondary instance of Massive here, which I'm calling fattened, as a backup, which I'm just going to process to a heavier extent than I do the top and mid line. So the top and mid, I'm going to introduce a couple audio effects to. I'm going to put in an instance of utility, and I'm just going to bring down the stereo width in it a little bit. Fattened, I'm going to put in a utility and bring it up a little bit, just so that whatever I choose to add is going to take up a little bit more of the spectrum. And we're not going to necessarily bother adding a sub right now, because this is a lead line, not a bass line, and we're getting a good amount of lower end thickness as is. So to start with, I'm going to take fattened, and I'm going to apply an EQ8 to it. I'm going to shave out a little bit of the lower range, and I'm going to pick a couple frequencies in the mid-high range to boost a little bit, just to get it to accent a little bit more in the upper frequencies. So we'll start around here. I'm just going to solo this, and we'll see what we're working with. Okay, cool. I'm going to immediately add a saturator with the a bit warmer preset right before EQ8 there. I'm going to bring that down in the mix a little bit. Let's listen to the two together. And we're going to add some spatial effects, just a simple delay. And we're going to go for a phaser as well. And I'm going to put the phaser before the delay in the chain. That way the delay is working on the output of the phaser. So I'm going to start off just by, actually turn off the delay, and we'll start off by playing with the phaser here and finding a frequency and feedback amount that we like. So I'm going to introduce a little bit of the dry signal back in. And because this is a funk kind of styled synth, there's going to be a little bit of benefit to adding some envelope control over this. So the envelope is just going to be jumping the frequency of the phaser up according to the volume input. So we're just going to tap that key a couple times and play with the envelope settings a little bit just to get some kind of harmonic sweeping. So we're getting a little bit of motion from the envelope there, which is quite nice. And I'm going to turn that delay on now, and I'm going to put it into time mode because we're going to want some really short delays. I'm going to bring the feedback up a bit, and let's hear how that sounds. That's sounding quite good. I almost feel like it could use a little bit more distortion, but I'm going to hold off on that right now because we're actually going to add a little bit of distortion to the entire mix. So I'm just going to bring the top mid synth back in. So we've got a nice big fat tone there already. I'm just going to quickly rename my rack as Sync Leader. And we're going to work on adding a couple really simple things to the output of the entire rack just to degrade the signal a little bit and give us a little bit more of a kind of rock and roll feel. So we're going to add an instance of erosion, which works quite well for degrading signals. And I'm just going to look for a sweet spot with it as well. That's sounding good, actually. And I'm going to take that and put it into an audio effect rack. And I'm going to create a chain here so that we have a wet-dry on the erosion effect. Listen to it dry. And that sounds about right for now. So that's just going to introduce a little bit of grit and hiss into the sound. And I'm going to also add an instance of amp. And we're going to start off with one of the presets here. We'll start with bass roundup, and we may tweak it out a little bit from there. Start all the way wet and hear what we have. So we're getting some nice space from that. There's some interesting top end stuff that's happening. You can hear that the sound feels a little bit more distant, and there's a little bit of harmonic distortion that's happening in the upper registers. But obviously we're destroying the body of the sound with that, and so again we're going to balance this out with our wet dry knob. Okay, maybe a little bit less. And I'm going to pop back in. I feel like we could maybe even go a little bit harder with our sync setting on that first oscillator that we were working with here. So I'm just going to add a little bit more of the envelope to that. Let's hear if I bring it up a lot. Yeah, too much. So. We'll bring a little bit of white noise in as well. And just because we have an absolute ton of stuff going on now, I'm going to just make sure that we've got it all under control. I'm going to bring in an instance of Ableton's compressor, bring down the threshold a little bit. I'm going to put it in RMS mode, so it's a nice averaging mode. And let's see what's happening with our gain reduction. Let me just throw a utility on the end. Bring it down a little bit. So that's a good starting point. And I'm going to add a beat and program a simple pattern now. And once I've got that done, I'm going to come back through and maybe adjust a few of the envelope settings and a little bit of the sync amount so that we're getting the effect that we want within the context of a track that we're working on. So I've created a simple phrase and a beat to go along with it, and I'll let you hear the phrase quickly. And I'll let you hear the beat as well, just so that you can hear all the elements before I add them together. So, very simple beat. So let's quickly listen to everything together here. So now that I've listened to this in context, what I'm going to do is actually dial back a little bit of the erosion, because I feel like we're losing a good amount of the warmth of that signal from that erosion just overriding the dry signal there. Let's just listen to this again. So we'll leave it closer to -9 there, and the amp I may pull back on as well. To introduce a little bit more of the treble from the amp. Okay, that sounded good. So I'm going to pop back into our instance of massive here that's providing the body of our tone, and I'm going to just adjust a few of the settings, a few of the release settings and the glide settings so that it works better with the pattern that I've created. Sometimes when you design a patch like this, you add various elements like glide and long release times and things like that, and they work when you're designing the patch and just playing it ad hoc on the keyboard. But when you've created a synth line and you're actually listening to it in the context of the tune, the tempo of the tune and the density of the tune might not work with what you've already programmed. So you need to go back and just kind of tweak those things out a little bit. So let's actually just have a quick listen. So I want a little bit more of that portamento, so I'm just going to bring the glide time upwards a little bit. And I feel like I've added a little bit too much grit to the sound. It's kind of overpowering the oscillator sync effect. So I'm going to pull back on the white noise a little bit here. And I'm going to pull back on the wet dry on that parabolic shaper a little bit. And now I'm just going to listen to the fattened tone. And I'll listen to my top mid. I feel like the fattened tone can come up in the mix a little bit. Okay, that's sounding better. And let's listen to them all together. Okay, that's sounding pretty good. So to get this to fit into the mix a little bit more, there's some other spatial effects that I would dial up within the context of a working track. For example, a little bit of dub delay and a little bit of extra reverb. But as it is, that sounds great for a nice sync lead patch. And as you can hear, it sounds good up and down the keyboard again. So there's a lot of nice elements in that patch, which means it's a really good starting point for a lot of other sounds as well. And that's how you create a nice envelope-swept sync lead. Definitely a sound that you'll end up using in your tunes.